Ransomware has been a fixture of the threat landscape for years, and trends suggest that it will keep going up. In this video, our guest expert John Fokker will walk you through ransomware attack techniques and give you some actionable insights on how to catch threat actors before your systems are encrypted. This content is brought to you by the Center for Cybersecurity Belgium. If you like this kind of information, please like and subscribe.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the CCB Connect and Share Cyber Tips webinar. My name is Clara Grillet, and I'm an analyst at the Center for Cybersecurity Belgium. We have quite a packed cyber tips today, so we're going to do our best to stay within 30 minutes while still taking the time to answer your questions at the end of this talk. So if you have questions, please don't hesitate to ask them, and at the end of this talk, the most upvoted questions will be answered live. While people are still trickling in, I wanted to let you know that our next Cyber Tips webinar will be about incidents and how to handle them. And you are close to about 75% to ask for cyber tips on incident response. So we're making this happen. And you can already book your agenda for the 19th of June. Today, we are addressing another hot topic in the cyber world, and that is ransomware. What I find fascinating is that ransomware is known outside the cyber community. And if you think about it, very few types of cyber attacks make it mainstream, if I may call it like this. Ransomware needs publicity among the general public because it is that fear of being in the media that drives managers to pay the ransom. But what is so interesting to study about ransomware is that it is a cyber-driven business model that is very good at adapting extremely quickly in order to maintain that fear. And so today, to talk about ransomware, I have the pleasure of welcoming our guest expert, John Fokker. John is head of threat intelligence at Trellix, and he has been studying ransomware for years. Welcome, John.
Hi, Clara. Happy to be here. I'm very excited and looking forward to a very engaging discussion today.
That's awesome. I'm really happy that you could take a little bit of time to come. So to get us started, nothing against you, but I do have a trick question. So in the past year, we have observed some well-known ransomware groups that are stealing and stealing data and extorting companies without bothering to encrypt the systems anymore. Does that still count as ransomware?
Yeah, that's an interesting debate, and one we often, even within our office, we debate about this a lot, especially if you deal with, well, researchers, because they say technically, yeah, it's not where, because there's no software involved and there's no encryption. But overall, the term ransomware is mostly used for any type of attack where the threat actor wants to control a victim's assets, and it could either be to exfiltrate data and extort them with it, or to encrypt data. And that's you can link that mostly towards like the CIA pyramid. So if you're familiar with confidentiality, availability, and integrity. So the C, the confidentiality, that's exfiltrating data and threatening to leak it, or the availability, figure out your IT systems are locked down, you cannot work anymore. So we have them as an umbrella term, or as we could say. So it's one term. It's common to use it that way. We often also just call it extortion, because that's what it is. It's very old, extortion.
All right. So what you're saying is that you have the confidentiality and or the availability of the data, of like the two elements that do matter to ransomware actors. But ultimately, it is the data and the sheer amount of data that ransomware groups want. So how do they know what kind of data is interesting to exfiltrate? How do they decide what is valuable? Do we know that?
Yeah, that's a funny one, because if you look at what criminals exfiltrate and what they threaten their victims with, and also in other cases where we see where data has been exfiltrated, they often have a different perception of what they find interesting as the actual targeted or the victim organization. So the organization might say like, oh, these are our crown jewels. But the threat actor comes in and he's like, oh yeah, I want this and this and that. So yes, obviously personal files, anything that is referring to an organization. For instance, if you have an organization and you have customers, or you're a medical organization, you have patient files, things like that are very interesting because it kind of builds up a double pressure. Because yes, you're threatening to leak stuff, but it's also impacting somebody else, not only the victim organization. So that's stuff that they find very interesting. And what we see is that some of the ransomware groups actually developed purposely built scanning tools to find interesting data. So they put in key terms, they look at certain file types, and they go across the machine. They launch this. So Lockbit had, for instance, SteelBit as a tool, as some of you might know. And they use that to scour the network, find interesting files, and exfiltrate those out. So yes, there's stuff that they're really going after, but it's not like they will only go after, let's say, hypothetically, to encrypt Coca-Cola. They will go after the Coca-Cola recipe. They're just as interested in all their customers, their employee files, or anything else, anything that could be embarrassing if it became public for that organization.
All right, thank you for that. So it's about what the ransomware actors think is interesting. And so they partially seem to automate the process of data collection. But what are they going to do with that data? Because would it be only for extortion, as you mentioned, vis-a-vis the victim itself? Or do they have a way of making profit outside the ransom itself? Because you talked about double pressure, and I kind of want to narrow it down on that.
Yeah, good point. So yes, the primary focus is ideal scenarios that, okay, I'm the threat actor, I exfiltrate the data, and I contact the victim organization and say, like, hey, do you want me to make this public, or can we have a deal and I'll delete it? So first and foremost, I want to already stop with it. In my opinion, you should never pay to get your data deleted, because there's no guarantee. And because one of the things that we've seen, or multiple cases we've seen, is that an organization is not ending up on the leak sites. Nobody knows about the breach, but the leaked data still pops up at a later moment. So what that means is that criminals will always want to make a profit. So it's either they strike a deal with the victim organization, and what we also see is that they sell these records somewhere else. So they will sell interesting information on the dark web. So we've seen data sets pop up there. And then lastly, there's something that, like, it's very worrisome to us, and we see this happen with a lot of the groups that have a pretty strong tie to, in this case, the Russian administration. And we saw that in the Conti leaks. So it's not like I'm making this up. In the Conti leaks, we actually saw the chats between the group where they attacked a military contractor in the US, and they purposely chose not to encrypt, but to exfiltrate the data, and not really to, yeah, they probably did an extortion claim, but their number one thing was, hey, this is interesting data for the government. They might be interested in this. So that could also be a case where it could act as a proxy, and they could actually sell the data to other people, and it could be even outside of forums or outside of the visibility of us as researchers.
Okay, so I understand from you that we need to expand our definition of profit. So we have the ransom on the one side, but there's many other ways that groups can monetize that stolen data. About the ransom itself, I have a couple questions here because there seems to be some fluctuation. There's media reporting sometimes that tells you that the average ransom goes up. Sometimes it tells you that it goes down. Do we know how ransomware actors set the ransom? Is it relative to company size? Is it the amount of stolen data? As you seem to be pointing out, could it be the importance of the organization to the country as well? Do we have any kind of insight on that?
Yeah, there's some insight. It's not that they would scour through your network, going to the financial department and looking at all the yearly figures and doing their own financial accounting and say, like, well, what is your company worth, and your ARR and your EBITDA is this and this. It's not like that. What criminals do quite well, and that's already very much embedded into the culture of cyber criminals when they're dealing, for instance, with initial access brokers, so people who offer access to a company and an organization. A lot of the targeting and to get reconnaissance on a potential victim and what it would be worth is done through business intelligence tools. So tools like Zoom Info, Rocket Reach, there's other tools out there as well. And the criminals use those tools to get an average or an estimate about, hey, what is this company's worth? And this is, I'm generalizing here, there's always outliers, but that's what we've seen quite a bit. And they look at the net worth according to Zoom Info, and that would be like a benchmark. And then obviously, like often they will take 2 to 4% of that annual net worth and said like, okay, this is your annual revenue, this is what your ransom demand is. And there's outliers, of course, and there's people that do, they highball an offer, or they put a high offer in to come down. So there's all that has to do with negotiation strategies. And mind you, I'm not the best negotiator. There's other people out there and are probably on the call here that do this every day. So, but in general, rule of thumb, we see that it's a percentage of the annual revenue from an organization.
So what you're hinting at is that there is a vested interest for ransomware groups to attack the bigger companies, not only because of their net worth, but also because there is also this aspect linked to potentially being interesting to other nation states. Is it just me reading it wrong, or do you also see that?
Well, it's funny. That's actually a double-edged thing. So like, yes, the large organizations will get you immediate headline news, will get you like your name in the newspaper. So it works really well for a criminal organization to make a name for themselves. However, larger organizations usually have a larger security budget, so they've invested in more stuff. So completely paralyzing the operations of a large organization is much more difficult. So what maybe data exfiltration is easier. However, what we've seen from the study, and it's also linked to the study of the CCB with, is there a link between the GDP and the amount or the organization size? What we saw is that actually it's not the largest organizations that get hit the most. It's somewhere in the middle curve where organizations didn't always invest in all the security controls. So they're actually an easier target for the criminals. But it is all, it's like this balance between, hey, what security controls can I expect? How did I get in? What is the net worth? So how much effort do I have to put in, and what's the reward? So going after a really, really big fish is also time consuming. Make no mistake, if you really want to control and put a very large organizations on their knees, that's not an easy job. That's quite a bit of work.
So you're talking about how to bring an organization to its knees, and of course, that for me as a defender, it really makes me think. Is there any kind of way for us to talk about how, like, what are the techniques and the ransomware attack flow that typically is used? Is there something that is pretty standard? Do you have any kind of information about what a ransomware attack chain would look like so that we can detect what defenders could do?
Oh yeah, totally. So ransomware is a big issue for us as Trellix. It's like we deal with customers that are faced with ransomware and they want to understand the problem as well. So what we've developed, and this is just a representation that we use internally, is we took the Lockheed Martin kill chain and we kind of like divided it up and made it a bit more specific for ransomware. So you have a reconnaissance phase, an initial access phase. Obviously, when criminals are in the network, so they have an initial foothold, they want to move around laterally because they want to know where the goods are. They want to know, and they want to become domain admin because otherwise they can't roll out the ransomware. So they want to escalate their privileges. Then it's a matter of like, okay, where's the good data? Where's the juicy details? Where's all the dirt on the CEO? Okay, we go out, we find it, and we want to exfiltrate it. And that's kind of a recurring process. And then if they want to deploy the encryption software, so the ransomware software, the coup de grace, the end stage, they need to degrade, or they need to take away the defenses. So that means like deleting or resizing volume shadow copies. That means like taking away backup facilities, making it really hard for a organization to recover itself. And then when that's done, you would see like, okay, then the final stab would be deploying the ransomware and then putting our organization to its knees. And then in our attack chain, we specifically have an additional part in it called recovery and retrospective, because it's not necessarily a kill chain where it's adversary-led, but we do want to emphasize that that's a very important part for any organization, because if you get hit by ransomware, okay, great, but you have to learn from it, and you have to, the way you act afterwards. So how do you take care of, how do you recover? How do you do your IR? How do you find out the root cause? What other precautions did you take? Did you do an initial audit afterwards? So all the holes that you were plugging, are you assured that they're closed? Did you alter your incident response plan? Do you, all the things you can do, tabletops, everything, all that stuff will set you up for success when the next threat actor comes. Because yeah, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, but how you're prepared, then you can almost welcome them with open, you don't want to say open arms, but at least it gives you the confidence that you're prepared to face and challenge head on.
So what I'm hearing is that basically along that kill chain, there are many moments where as defenders, you would be able to detect ransomware activity. And it doesn't have to go all the way to encryption for you to say, oh, well, now it is too late. Do you have?
Yeah. So maybe I can highlight a little bit before we go in.
Go
So
ahead.
very, very often you see defenders like, oh, I want to learn. And that we get that too. Oh, I want the latest IOCs on Lockbit, or the latest hashes for the Lockbit virus, or for Black Basta, or whoever it is, right? And we're like, yeah, we can give you that, but that's at the end. We much rather help you in and give you explanations on the living off the land binaries that all the groups use, with the command lines that they actually execute, all the scripts that we have seen. So if you have a competent team, you can use all this to start hunting or build tripwires in your environment and hunting your SIM to actually, or use your EDR to find evidence when they're moving around within your organization, or have your DLP solution alert when somebody is just like putting a pipeline in and sending all your data to the cloud unauthorized. So that's the stuff, and it starts with the beginning, right? It's still, phishing is a big thing. So have an email solution, look at your vulnerabilities, so patch management, maybe virtual patching, all that stuff, as well as just your generic or your baseline defense, and that's endpoint security. Having an endpoint security as a sensor on every endpoint, that's also key. And then, yeah, we can flavor threat intelligence through every cycle as well, but that's unbiased, obviously.
Do you have specific recommendations that you would give to detect malicious activity? Because as you rightly pointed out, it doesn't have to be the ransomware itself, as in the software at the very end, but how would you, as a defender, like what would be the tips for you to know this is what I need to implement right now so that I am able to detect malicious activity?
Yeah. So the first phase, I don't know if the viewers can see it, but the reconnaissance phase, yeah, you can harden your systems against scanning. So performing external attack surface monitoring scans to your own organization is actually very helpful, because then you have visibility of what you're exposing. So, and making sure you expose only the bare minimum and the rest is just unknown will limit that attack surface. Same goes, and you can even do it for looking at like what's your company profile and where you're at in those business intelligence tools, and is there stuff that is like you don't want there. So that might go a little further, but obviously threat actors are always after accounts. So having multi-factor authentication across your entire estate is very important. RDP, also nice entryway, always disable it. It's there's other ways to doing it. And then, like I said, like vulnerabilities, the patch management. So looking at like the holes that are in the system that they can exploit. And then the basic, the anti-malware, because we still see that the chain or the ransomware attack, and you can, funny enough, you don't have to take my word for it. You can just read the Black Basta leaks or the Conti leaks. There is such an integral part where they're close together with other commodity malware. So like Basta had like Pikabot, and they wanted to purchase Darkgate exclusively for a year. So they're very closely tied to all these like info stealers and loader malwares that are a gateway. So they get infected at large and they find the victims that they want, and then they hop in and then follow the whole cycle.
So another question that I have is, now we've been talking about what it is that you need to do before ransomware hits, but what happens, or what is the advice that you would give to somebody who walks in the morning, realizes everything's encrypted, they're about to have their worst day ever? What should you do?
first of all, stay calm, because it's already there. And at least it's a cyber attack, and it's a joke, but it's true. It is it's one of the biggest cyber attacks that will actually announce itself. So you don't have to worry if you're breached or not, you're breached, because they will tell you. What we often see is that it's very emotional. That's why it's also front page news. It's very disruptive, very aggressive in your face. So, like, first of all, don't panic. If you have cyber insurance, contact them. If you have an incident response party, contact them. Contact the CCB. Contact you guys, because you might have the information. Contact law enforcement, and have your incident response plan ready. Like, we give courses around ransomware, and we do tabletops and everything else, and then an organization comes in like, yeah, we got a great incident response plan, and we have everything for the protocol for ransomware, and we updated, and it's all great. And it's like, okay, great, where is it? Yeah, it's on this drive, and it's a Word document. I was like, oh, great, it's now encrypted. What do you do? And they're like, shoot, what do we do? So print it out. It seems very, very stupid, but yeah, print it out, have it there. And use professionals. So if you're a commercial organization and you're used to doing sales negotiations or whatever, forget it that you're dealing with another sales negotiation. That's not the case. You're dealing with hardened criminals that do this for a living. So if you choose to engage with these folks, make sure you have a professional at your side, that you know what you're doing, and report it. You might have regulatory reporting you have to adhere to because it's a cyber incident. Your national cert and the police. Very often we work a lot with the police, and there's actually a success story. We had and this is just a story. Let's see in time. Yeah, we can talk about it. We had a customer somewhere in the world who was rolling out our stuff, but still got hit with Lockbit. But they got hit by Lockbit a week before the takedown was there. But we already knew about the actions that were taking place. So we were like, hey, thank God you alerted us, so we can alert the police. And with Europol and the UK police in this case, we were able to obtain the decryption key for this victim. So the systems that were impacted, we were able to help them get back to that system. If they've never approached us, they would have never known about the decryption key. They would have paid the ransom because they had no other option. So don't be afraid, reach out, because it might actually be that they have valuable information. And I mean like the CCB or the police, other organizations, because they're dealing with multiple incidents, and you might have things or characteristics that are vital to them, but they also might have knowledge from the attackers that could help you out.
So as you rightly pointed out, you should report ransomware to the police, but also to your national authority for cybersecurity. And if you were in Belgium, in this case, that is the CCB. You can see all 3 ways to notify us on the slide. Preferably use the online form. If you don't know how to report a cyber incident, I would highly recommend that you watch our previous Cyber Tips webinar that was on incident reporting, and that's also now available on YouTube. The time flies. We are coming towards the end of the webinar, which means that it is time for John to take questions from the audience. Remember, it's the most upvoted questions that will be answered live. But before that, to give John a little time to breathe and to take a look at the questions, I just have a couple of announcements. The first is that there will be more webinars planned in the near future. So on the 25th of April, our QCTRs are coming back with a bang. I'm not going to say anything now, but be sure to attend for some very juicy information. Another important thing is that if you have any topic that you would like us to talk about, let us know in the chat or via email. We're always happy to take suggestions, and we're going to be doing our best to be able to bring you the information that you need. Another quick second of attention, did you know that the CCB is hiring? So if you feel like it's time to make a change, or you know somebody who would be a great addition to the team, take a look, apply. We'd be happy to hear all about it. Now it's back to you, John. Please go ahead, pick your first question.
Yeah, I'm competing with Nico, who's backstage answering questions, but I love this question. How is AI altering the game, and do you see this in reality? I actually have a talk at RSA about this. And our threat report is coming out at the end of the month. And one of the things that we have as a stable item is how we have observed threat actors or cyber criminals leverage AI. So where are they in adaptation of this new innovation? So it's like, and what is important with this is that there's a difference between innovation and transformation. So just like us defenders, I think, by the way, if you ask me right off the bat, who has the best advantage? I think us as defenders have the best opportunity to leverage AI quickly head on, because there's a lot of systems out there, there's a lot of alerts, and there's alert fatigue. So combining everything together and using AI to have a consistent answer and to correlate a lot of alerts, there is a huge opportunity for us as defenders. We do see cyber criminals tap their feet in stuff. So Black Basta, they were actually, and this is a very funny case, and we wrote it in our blog, they were leveraging AI. They actually got caught. So they were taking over a session on the system, and one of the users was logged in, and he saw his mouse move around or whatever, and he was like, holy shit, what's going on? I mean, my computer's possessed. So he typed a message. It's like, hey, what's going on? Who are you? And at the other end in Russia, they were like, oh, we got caught. So we solved this. And they actually used ChatGPT to generate a message to say, hey, we're the SOC, don't worry, we're doing a routine checkup and a routine test, and they send that back to the user, and the user was like, oh, thank God, and blah, 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 and he was calmed down, and then they encrypted the whole system. So that was just a funny anecdote. There are definitely strides, so they're making more improvements, but it is actually a very complex story when you look at, like, innovation is one thing, but transforming the whole kill chain, especially for cyber criminals, is quite difficult, because cyber criminals are always leveraging each other's services. So it's a whole chain of different services, and every service has to change to somewhat level in order to facilitate innovation of the other. So you're all dependent on each other. So that makes it a little harder, but still we're seeing improvements in, like, obfuscation, some other things. They do code review. So there's definitely the automation of the mundane. So like the simple tasks and all that stuff. Yeah, that's definitely happening. But a complete overhaul, like, oh my God, we have never seen this form of crime, and there's a new form of crime because of AI. That's still not at the level that we're like, okay, this is completely new.
That's definitely one of the most nuanced version and explanation in talking about AI and cybercrime that I've heard. So thank you for that. I think we have a little bit of time for another question.
Let's see some of these techniques. Yeah, so I like from Christophe Meersman. The speaker was referring to scan techniques by attackers to find valuable data. Are there useful resources where some of these techniques, search queries, etc., are openly shared? I think that's a fascinating one. So for us, like, it differs, right? Because we've seen cases where they used even DT search, which is a normal system. And sometimes we see software, when we reverse it, when we look at the software, we can see what file types they're searching for. So that could be a clue. So these are all, like, I have to look up some of our blogs, but these are all user-based files. So documents, Excel sheets, it could be databases. Sometimes they look for VMware, VMDK files, all kinds of stuff. But for instance, where Lockbit and Steelbit, it could be generated for a user, and they would say, okay, these are the topics that they're interested in, and you could build your own keyword list to build these topics. So they're very generic. It's all about, like, finance, personnel, HR, all those keywords. Heck, if I would have it build it right off the bat now, I would load up ChatGPT and I would say, like, hey, what would be the most common keywords used in an organization where I'm looking for files that are personal files or whatever. And hopefully I don't get caught by OpenAI that they think I'm a criminal. But yeah, it's all these referring, like, keywords that are linked to either business documents or personal documents.
All right, thank you. I think we're getting towards the end of this webinar. We're just a little bit late, running 2 minutes late. So don't worry, if your question hasn't been answered by John right now, you will receive answers soon via email. It is time for me to say a big thank you to our expert, John Fokker, for his very actionable tips.
Thanks, Clara. It was a pleasure. The time flew by.
Every time we have a conversation, it flies by. It's crazy. But thank you also to all of you for watching and for asking questions. We'll be happy to see you next time on the 19th of June for the next edition of Cyber Tips, this time on incident handling. Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.